Empires do not fall the way we imagine. They do not collapse in a single battle. They do not crumble the moment an enemy crosses their border, and they are almost never destroyed by the force they fear the most. Every major empire in history has died the same quiet death. Not from sword or cannon, not from invasion or rebellion, but from something far more invisible, far more internal, and far more dangerous. They died when their money died. In the year 200 AD, a Roman soldier could hold a silver denarius in his hand and know exactly what it meant. It was a promise, a guarantee, a shared belief that this coin contained real value, backed by a powerful empire. That coin built roads, fed armies, funded conquests, and held together a civilization of 60 million people. By the year 265 AD, that same coin was almost worthless. The silver was gone, the trust was gone, and the empire that once ruled the known world was rotting from within. 12 centuries later, the Spanish Empire controlled more silver than any nation before or since. They believed that the world would always accept their currency, that more money meant more power, and that their wealth could never run out. They were wrong. Spain defaulted 4 times in 40 years, and their empire never recovered. Then came Britain, the empire that built the modern world, the empire whose currency was once the foundation of global trade, the empire whose influence stretched across continents. By 1945, they were bankrupt. By 1950, the pound sterling had lost its place as the world's reserve currency. By 1970, the empire that ruled a quarter of humanity was gone. And now, in 2025, the United States stands at the same crossroads. America is the global superpower, the issuer of the world reserve currency, the center of global finance, technology, and military strength, the nation that believes it is different, exceptional, immune. But the pattern says otherwise. Across 2,000 years of history, from Rome to Spain to Britain, the same 7-stage cycle has repeated with brutal precision: dominance, overextension, deficit spending, currency debasement, inflation, loss of confidence, collapse. History is not subtle, it is not vague, it does not whisper. It speaks loudly, in numbers, in patterns, in consequences that no nation can escape. And today, the United States is moving through these stages step by step, almost exactly on schedule. The debt is surging, the money supply is exploding, the dollar is losing global share, the world is building alternatives, the cost of maintaining a global empire is rising, and the pressure is mounting. Rome did not know it was falling when it began. Spain did not realize it was collapsing until it was too late. Britain believed it could hold on to its empire forever. Every empire thinks the same thing, that they are different, that the rules do not apply to them, that the collapse will never come. And every empire has been wrong. In the next few minutes, we will walk through the entire pattern, how Rome, Spain, and Britain followed the same 7 stages, how the United States is repeating the cycle right now, and why the most dangerous stage is the one no one notices until the moment everything breaks. Not opinion, not prediction, simply the pattern that has ended every empire before us. And the question we must ask is simple: which stage is America in, and how much time is left? Every empire begins the same way, not with glory, not with ambition, but with discipline. The discipline to control spending, the discipline to maintain sound money, the discipline to limit expansion to what can be paid for. What we call the rise of an empire is really the rise of a financial system, a system built on trust, stability, and credibility. Because long before an empire can project force or build monuments, it must first convince the world that its money means something. A currency is not a piece of metal. It is not a piece of paper. It is a contract, a belief, a shared illusion powerful enough to move armies and shape continents. When that belief is strong, the empire becomes strong. When that belief weakens, everything built upon it begins to shake. This is the foundation of the pattern. It begins quietly. A young, disciplined state issues money backed by something real, usually precious metal or strict fiscal policy. Merchants trust it. Soldiers accept it. Foreign powers respect it. But as the empire expands, something changes. Success creates entitlement. Entitlement creates spending. Spending creates deficits. Deficits create temptation. And the greatest temptation in imperial history is the ability to cheat your own currency. At first, the cheating is subtle. A little less silver in the coin. A small tax to fund a distant war. A temporary suspension of convertibility. A few billion borrowed to cover an emergency. The people barely notice. Why would they? They are still living in the glow of past victories, still believing in the reputation the empire earned generations earlier. But beneath the surface, the system has already shifted. The empire is no longer paying for its power. It is borrowing it. It is at this moment that decline begins, not with invasion or rebellion, but with the first quiet cracks in the monetary foundation. This is the thread that connects Rome, Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. Not culture, not ideology, not geography, but money. Empires rise on sound money. They fall on broken money. And the irony is that every empire believes the same story, that they have unlocked a secret, discovered a loophole, found a way to spend without consequence. Rome believed debasement would be temporary. Spain believed silver would flow forever. Britain believed the world would always accept the pound. America believed the dollar would be trusted no matter how many trillions were printed. Every empire thinks its prestige is permanent. Every empire thinks its debt is manageable. Every empire thinks its currency is too important to fail. And every empire discovers that history does not negotiate. This is the context in which the pattern begins to reveal itself. To see the fall of America, you must first see the fall of Rome. To understand the decline of the dollar, you must understand the decline of the Spanish real. To recognize the warning signs of the present, you must study the decisions of the past. Patterns do not exist to explain history. They exist to predict what comes next, and the pattern is unavoidable. The moment an empire starts using its currency as a weapon, a shortcut, or a political tool, the countdown begins. The collapse does not happen suddenly. It begins slowly, almost invisibly. The empire grows, but the money weakens. The military expands, but the debt rises. The government gains power, but the discipline vanishes. It is a process so gradual that entire generations fail to see it, even as they live through it. Life feels normal. Markets rise, wars are won. Prestige endures, until one day the illusion breaks. Trade partners hedge, foreign banks diversify, investors seek alternatives. Prices rise faster than wages. Savings lose value. Confidence cracks. Then collapse accelerates. Because once trust is gone, there is no empire strong enough to force the world to believe in its currency again. This is why we must trace the story backward, starting at the source. Before America, before Britain, before Spain, there was Rome, the first great test case of imperial finance, the first empire to discover that money can build a civilization and destroy it. And their story begins with a coin that changed the world, the denarius. From Rome to Spain to Britain, the same financial script repeats. 3 empires separated by centuries, languages, technologies, and ideologies. Yet all 3 fell in the exact same way, through the slow destruction of their own currency. To see the future of the dollar, you must first walk through the ruins of the empires that came before it. Rome did not begin as a global empire. It began as a small city-state surviving on discipline, efficiency, and fiscal restraint. And at the center of that system was a coin that became a symbol of trust across continents, the silver denarius. For centuries, the denarius was as good as its weight in silver. It paid soldiers, funded roads, built aqueducts, and served as a universal medium of exchange across the Mediterranean. But Rome had a problem that every empire eventually faces. Its ambitions grew faster than its revenues. Conquest brought glory. Conquest brought slaves. Conquest brought territory. But conquest also brought cost. More borders to defend. More legions to pay. More roads to maintain. More enemies to subdue. By the 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire was the largest state the Western world had ever seen, but it was also becoming too large to sustain. Tax revenues stagnated, military spending soared, and emperors faced a choice every empire eventually confronts. Tell the people the truth and raise taxes, or tell them a lie and debase the money. Rome chose the lie. The silver content of the denarius began to fall. Nero reduced it from 100% purity to 90%. Successive emperors went further, 80%, 60%, 40%. By 250 AD, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. It still looked like a coin. It still had the emperor's face on it. But it was no longer money. It was a symbol of a promise Rome could no longer keep. Inflation began to devour the empire from within. Prices soared. Merchants demanded payment in gold or barter. Soldiers grew restless as their pay lost value. Entire regions rebelled. And as the currency collapsed, so did Rome's ability to maintain its empire. Legions refused to fight without real pay. Trade networks disintegrated. The tax base evaporated. When Rome finally fell, the barbarians did not defeat a healthy empire. They simply walked into the hollow shell of one. Rome collapsed not because its enemies grew stronger, but because its money grew weaker. The pattern begins here. If Rome teaches us that debasement destroys empires, Spain teaches us something even darker. Too much money can destroy a nation faster than too little. In the 1500s, Spain discovered the richest silver and gold deposits in human history. Potosi in modern Bolivia was a mountain of silver so vast it fueled European trade for more than a century. Spanish ships carried hundreds of tons of precious metal back to Europe every year. Spain should have become invincible. Instead, it became addicted. With so much silver flowing in, Spain stopped producing. Why cultivate crops when you can buy food from abroad? Why build ships when you can hire foreign shipbuilders? Why develop industry when silver can pay for everything? The empire became a giant consumer economy with no internal production to support its lifestyle. Silver masked decay for decades, but eventually the mask fell. Spain fought endless wars against France, against the Ottoman Empire, against the Dutch rebels, against England, against anyone who challenged their dominance. The costs were astronomical, and when tax revenues failed to keep up, Spain repeated Rome's mistake. They debased their currency. The silver real became diluted. Copper was mixed in. Purity dropped. Inflation surged. Merchants began rejecting Spanish coins. Foreign lenders demanded higher interest rates, and eventually the facade shattered. Spain declared bankruptcy in 1557, 1560, 1575, 1596, 4 sovereign defaults in 40 years. The empire that controlled the world's wealth ran out of money. And this is the key lesson Spain teaches us. Resource wealth cannot save a nation from fiscal irresponsibility. It can actually accelerate collapse by hiding the underlying rot. Spain became addicted to silver in the same way Rome became addicted to debasement. Both believed temporary shortcuts could support permanent ambitions. They were wrong. The British Empire did not fall on the battlefield. It fell in a conference room. For more than 200 years, Britain ruled the global economy. The pound sterling was the world reserve currency. British bonds were the gold standard of trust. Every major trade contract was priced in pounds. London was the center of global finance. But like Rome and Spain before it, Britain expanded beyond what it could sustain. By 1900, the British Empire covered a quarter of the Earth's landmass, every continent, every ocean, every major trade route. It was magnificent on paper, but financially fragile underneath. World War I shattered that illusion. Britain spent the equivalent of more than $1 trillion modern dollars. They borrowed heavily from the United States. They sold off gold reserves. They mortgaged the financial foundation of their empire. After the war, they tried to restore the pound to its old value. They pretended nothing had changed. Everything had changed. British exports collapsed. Unemployment soared. The pound became impossible to defend. Then came World War II, the final blow. By 1945, Britain was bankrupt. Not metaphorically, literally bankrupt. The empire that once financed the world was now dependent on American loans just to survive. And then came Bretton Woods, 1944, the conference where the world quietly replaced the pound with the US dollar as the reserve currency. Britain's decline was sealed not with gunfire, but with signatures. By 1970, the British Empire was gone. By 1980, the pound had fallen from a global currency to a regional one. The pattern had repeated again. Military overextension, excessive debt, currency debasement, reserve currency collapse. 3 empires, 3 stories, 1 pattern. Rome fell because it diluted silver. Spain fell because it drowned in silver. Britain fell because it overpromised and overborrowed. But all 3 shared the same fate. Their money died before their empire did. This is the pattern every empire follows, a pattern older than capitalism, older than nation-states, older than modern economics. And now, in 2025, the United States is following the exact same sequence. Not similar, not reminiscent, not comparable, identical. History looks chaotic on the surface. Wars, revolutions, assassinations, economic shocks, charismatic leaders, unpredictable events. But beneath all of it, beneath the noise and the drama, there is a structure, a sequence, a mechanical process that repeats with mathematical consistency. Every empire, no matter how unique it believes itself to be, follows the same 7-stage collapse cycle. Not some empires, not most empires, every one of them. The pattern is so consistent, so predictable, that once you see it, you can look at any modern superpower and know exactly where it stands. And right now, the United States fits the pattern with unnerving precision. Before we look at America, we must understand the model itself. Here are the 7 stages. Stage 1, Foundations and Discipline. Every empire begins with strict financial discipline. The currency is sound. The government is cautious. Debts are limited. Taxes are moderate. Infrastructure grows gradually. And expansion happens only when it can be paid for. This is when trust is built. Merchants trust the currency. Foreigners trust the state. Citizens trust the system. Rome in the early Republic. Spain before the influx of silver. Britain during the early Industrial Revolution. The money is strong because the discipline is strong. Stage 2. Rapid expansion and rising costs. Success changes everything. Victories come easily. Trade expands. Territory grows. Wealth floods in. The empire becomes accustomed to abundance, but expansion brings cost. Armies must be stationed abroad. Roads and ports must be built. Colonies must be administered. Wars must be fought to maintain the empire. The early signs of imbalance begin here. Spending rises faster than revenue. Promises rise faster than production. The empire grows outward, but the financial core stops growing. Rome at its largest. Spain at its richest. Britain at its most vast. This is the beginning of overextension. Stage 3. Deficit spending and political addiction. The empire now faces a choice: cut spending and shrink influence, or borrow money and maintain dominance. Every empire chooses to borrow. Why? Because cutting spending is politically suicidal. Because no leader wants to preside over contraction. Because the nation expects the lifestyle of empire to continue. So deficits become normal, borrowing becomes permanent, spending becomes disconnected from reality. At first it is justified: a war, a crisis, a recession. Then it becomes routine: programs, subsidies, pensions, foreign aid, military bases. Debt rises, interest grows, the addiction deepens. Rome borrowed from future generations by diluting silver. Spain borrowed from bankers across Europe. Britain borrowed from America. This is the point where collapse becomes inevitable, even if invisible. Stage 4. Currency debasement or money printing. When deficits grow too large, when debt becomes unpayable, when promises exceed revenue, the empire turns to its last tool: cheating the currency. In ancient times, this meant debasing coins. Rome melted silver coins and added copper. Spain diluted their reals. Even China, Persia, and Byzantium followed this pattern. In the modern era, debasement takes a new form: printing money, expanding credit, monetizing debt, quantitative easing, fiat currency inflation. The mechanism changes. The result does not. Once the currency is debased, trust begins to fracture. The empire can no longer hide its financial weakness. This is the point of no return. Stage 5. Inflation and loss of purchasing power. The effect of debasement is always inflation, not at first. In the early phase, inflation looks harmless. People rationalize it. They blame supply chains, bad harvests, foreign enemies, greedy merchants. But slowly, systematically, inflation eats the middle class. Savings lose value. Salaries cannot keep up. Prices rise faster than income. People become angry, anxious, and politically unstable. Rome experienced this. Prices doubled, then tripled, then exploded. Spain saw massive inflation from the silver flood. Britain devalued again and again after the wars. Stage 5 is when the empire begins to feel the collapse in daily life. Stage 6. Loss of confidence at home and abroad. Stage 6 is the moment the world begins to doubt the empire. Foreign investors diversify. Trade partners reduce exposure. Allies hedge. Rivals challenge the empire diplomatically, economically, militarily. The currency loses reserve status, or it weakens to the point it no longer anchors global trade. Confidence disappears first slowly, then suddenly. For Rome, foreign soldiers refused debased coins. For Spain, European bankers refused to lend. For Britain, Bretton Woods ended the pound. This is the breaking point. Once confidence is lost, collapse accelerates. Stage 7, collapse and reset collapse, varies in form, but the end is always the same. Rome split into fragments. Spain shrank into irrelevance. Britain lost its empire in less than a generation. Collapse can be dramatic or quiet. Dramatic: bank failures, political revolts, currency crisis, military defeat. Quiet: debt restructuring, loss of global influence, permanent stagnation. But the result is identical. The empire that dominated the world becomes a former power. Its currency becomes a local currency. Its debt becomes unpayable. Its promises become memories. Different cultures, different eras, different technologies, but the same sequence. From Rome to Spain to Britain to America. The story does not change. What changes is the speed. Rome took centuries to fall. Spain collapsed in less than a century. Britain lost its empire in 3 decades. And the United States is moving through the cycle faster than any empire before it. Stage 1 and Stage 2 are already behind us. Stage 3 began in the 1970s. Stage 4 exploded in 2008 and again in 2020. Stage 5 is happening right now. Stage 6 is beginning. Stage 7 is the future. The pattern is not speculation. It is not theory. It is not ideology. It is the mathematics of imperial decline. And the math says the United States is far deeper into the cycle than most Americans realize. Empires never believe they are collapsing while it is happening. Rome did not know. Spain did not know. Britain did not know. Right until the end, they believed they were different, exceptional, immune. America is no different. The United States is the most powerful nation on earth, the issuer of the world reserve currency, the backbone of global finance, the guarantor of international trade, the military anchor of Europe and Asia, the center of technology, media, and capital. But beneath the surface, the same pattern that destroyed every empire before it is unfolding in real time, stage by stage, data point by data point, decision by decision. The decline is not coming. It is here. To understand where the United States stands in 2025, we only need to map the 7-stage model onto modern data, and the match is exact. Stage 1, the era of discipline, ended long ago. The United States rose on sound money, strong industry, and a growing productive base. In 1944, Bretton Woods made the dollar the world reserve currency. In 1945, America produced half of the world's total industrial output. In 1950, the U.S. was the world's factory. Stage 2, rapid expansion, dominated the Cold War years. The U.S. built alliances on every continent, military bases in dozens of countries, defense commitments across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, foreign aid, reconstruction plans, and open-ended global security guarantees. It was a period of unrivaled dominance, and like all empires in Stage 2, America began to expand faster than it could sustain. The turning point came in 1971. Nixon ended the gold convertibility of the dollar. The U.S. could no longer maintain fiscal discipline and global commitments simultaneously. From that moment on, the United States entered Stage 3, deficit spending as a permanent political strategy. In 1971, the national debt was $400 billion. By 2000, it was $5.7 trillion. By 2008, $10 trillion. By 2020, $23 trillion. By 2024, $34 trillion. Now in 2025, it is approaching $36 trillion. America has not run a truly balanced budget in over 2 decades. Every administration, every Congress, every political party increased debt. Like Spain drowning in silver, America drowned in credit. The addiction was complete. Stage 4, currency debasement, the age of printed money. If Rome debased silver and Spain diluted reals, the United States debased dollars through something far more powerful, a printing press connected to the global financial system. In 2008, during the financial crisis, the Federal Reserve unleashed the first wave of quantitative easing. Trillions were created to stabilize the system. In 2020, during the pandemic, the money supply surged again. More than 40% of all dollars in existence were created in less than 2 years. This was debasement, not in metal, but in mathematics. The mechanism was modern. The effect was ancient. The dollar lost purchasing power. Asset prices inflated beyond fundamentals, and the global economy began slowly reducing its dependence on America. Stage 4 was not an event. It was a policy the United States is now trapped inside. Stage 5 is the point where citizens feel collapse directly. Inflation is not a mistake. It is not temporary. It is not transitory. It is the mathematical consequence of Stage 4. Prices rise because trust falls. Purchasing power declines because currency supply expands. Savings evaporate because money is no longer scarce. Between 2020 and 2023, Americans saw the fastest spike in living costs in 40 years. Food prices surged, energy costs rose. Housing became unreachable for an entire generation. Credit card debt hit all-time highs. This is what happens when an empire pushes the cost of global dominance onto its own people. Inflation is not the beginning of collapse. Inflation is a symptom that collapse is already underway. Stage 6, loss of confidence. The world begins to move. On this stage is the most dangerous, because once confidence breaks, collapse accelerates. The United States is entering this stage now. Evidence is overwhelming. 1. Decline of USD reserve share, 2000, 73%, 2020, 59%, 2024, under 55%, the fastest drop in modern history. 2. BRICS expansion and parallel payment systems. China, India, Russia, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, and more are building currency systems outside the dollar. 3. Oil no longer priced exclusively in dollars. The 1974 petrodollar agreement effectively ended in 2023. Saudi Arabia now accepts yuan, rupees, and local currencies for oil. 4. Foreign central banks dumping U.S. debt. China has reduced its U.S. Treasury holdings by hundreds of billions. Russia holds almost none. Even allies like Japan and France are diversifying. 5. Global gold purchases at record highs. Central banks are buying gold at levels not seen since the 1960s. Gold is the asset nations buy when they no longer trust a currency. This is stage 6, the loss of global confidence, the moment when the world begins to prepare for life after the dollar. This stage is irreversible. Once global trust breaks, no empire has ever recovered. Not Rome, not Spain, not Britain, and now not the United States. Stage 7, collapse, not yet, but inevitable. The United States is not in stage 7, not yet, but it is moving toward it at accelerating speed. Stage 7 can take many forms: a currency crisis, a debt default, a wave of bank failures, a political breakdown, a geopolitical shock, a loss of reserve status, a forced monetary reset. The trigger is unpredictable. The outcome is not. Every empire in stage 6 enters stage 7. Every time, without exception. The world does not end, but the world changes. The United States will remain a large, wealthy nation, but it will no longer be the global empire it once was. Its currency will no longer anchor the world. Its debt will no longer be absorbed effortlessly by foreign buyers. Its influence will shrink. Its standard of living will decline. Collapse is not fire and ruin. Collapse is the moment an empire becomes normal. And America, the nation that built its identity on being exceptional, is not prepared for normal. History is not a mystery. It is not random. It is not unpredictable. It is a loop, a cycle, a pattern repeated by every empire that believed it was different. Rome believed its legions would last forever. Spain believed its silver would never run out. Britain believed its empire was the natural order of the world. America believes the dollar is eternal. But no empire in history has ever escaped the consequences of its own money. The pattern is clear. Discipline creates strength. Strength creates expansion. Expansion creates debt. Debt creates debasement. Debasement creates inflation. Inflation destroys trust. And the loss of trust ends the empire. Every step feels normal while it is happening. Every warning is dismissed. Every collapse begins long before anyone realizes it. The people living inside an empire never feel the fall until it is too late. For them, the decline feels like a series of isolated problems. Higher prices, political division, foreign tensions, social unrest, economic anxiety. But these are not separate issues. They are symptoms of the same disease, a currency that has lost its anchor, a system that can no longer sustain its promises, an empire that must borrow from the future to survive the present. The United States is not collapsing tomorrow, but the cycle is moving. The stages are unfolding. The pattern is complete, and the world is preparing for what comes next. The fall of an empire is not the end of the world. It is the end of a world, a financial order, a geopolitical structure, a way of life built on the assumption that the dollar will always be trusted. That assumption is dying, and with it, the America we grew up in. If this video has changed the way you see the future, subscribe, because in our next episode, we go deeper into the question every empire eventually faces: what actually happens when a reserve currency dies, not in theory, in practice, in the real world, to real people. We will break down the final moment in the pattern, the point where confidence evaporates, the point where the system resets, the point where history turns. Empires do not repeat, patterns do, and the next pattern is already unfolding.